Hello, welcome back to the Decoding Phase Transitions, the DPT podcast. And this is your host, Sananda Biswas. Here we decode the career phases of brilliant minds in academia and beyond. Today's episode is the part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Iverina Ivanova, where we dive deep into her academic and professional career across Europe. She opens up about navigating challenges, adapting to new environments, and following her drive to merge linguistics with technology. From a summer school in Ghent that prepared her for life abroad, to combining tech and language studies during her master's in Marburg, and ultimately making a bold decision to quit her job as a junior analyst to pursue PhD in Frankfurt. This is a story of courage, curiosity, and transformation. We also touch on fascinating discussions about ChatGPT, AI, large language model, and vital role of linguists in today's technological landscape. We also discuss the satisfactory and challenging aspects of teaching in higher education. Stick around until the end, where Dr. Ivanova shares some fun trivia about herself and personal reflection from her PhD journey. If you haven't already listened, part 1 of our conversation, where Dr. Ivanova shares her journey through language, resilience, and transforming challenges into stepping stones, you can check it out right here. And now, let's get into our enriching conversation with Dr. Iverina Ivanova. Welcome, Eva, back to part 2 of our conversation.
Thank you for having me back.
We are always glad to have you here. Last time in part 1, we had discussed your early career and your career journey up to your bachelor's degree. And back then, you had already got introduced that was your first introduction to including technology in your expertise, and then you decided to do masters. How did you choose where to do your masters from, and whether you had to apply online or did some interviews? What was the whole experience?
My decision to do masters was highly influenced by my former professor in Sofia University, Professor Venku. She was doing syntax at that time in Sofia University during my BA program. She noticed that I'm highly interested in linguistics in particular, not so much in translation or literary studies. As you know, as I talked about last time, I was doing English philology, and philology in Bulgaria includes linguistics, literary studies, cultural studies, and translation. And there are different specializations after the BA. Some of my colleagues went into translation directly, so they did extra courses, MA courses in translation, either for fiction translation or simultaneous translation, or I don't know, specialized translation, legal translation, medical translations. So there are different programs for that, as far as I can remember.
Even at the bachelor's level?
Yes. So they give you a hint in the BA what kind of translations you will be doing. You also have selective courses for translation, which I have also taken. I realized very quickly that I can't see myself as a translator, in the sense that we have done all kinds of translations, not only, for example, fiction, but fiction was the recurrent type of texts that we were doing. Also for our exams, we were doing mostly translations of fiction. For me, it was really hard experience.
So you mean fictional novels, or
yes, exactly,
some
of fiction, fiction text,
some piece of writing?
exactly, piece of writing, either of modern authors or classics. I do remember that some of my colleagues were very interested in specialized translations, for example, of legal texts, and they were doing also courses in law on the side, so that they can get really involved into the process. As I was saying, I was talking to my professor, and she also provided some pointers that might be of interest to me in terms of linguistics, but she was also aware I'm interested in technologies as well. For me, it was not clear at that time how I would like to combine linguistics and technologies, but she offered a few places abroad that might be of interest to me that I can apply for with a scholarship. I wasn't really sure whether I would like to go, for example, to Germany, as I have no connections directly to German friends or acquaintances who have already experience in Germany. So I was very random in the sense that I didn't have very good reasons why I would like to come to Germany for my MA studies. I had, as I said, a few options to choose from. That was Tübingen, that was Marburg, where I eventually went to. And I think in Heidelberg, there was back then a linguistics program. In Frankfurt, at that time, that was in 2013, I believe. There was no linguistics program per se as an MA program. I think that came later,
Okay.
maybe with my professors who were the founders of the English linguistics department at Goethe University. But that came a little bit later. So at the time when I was applying for an MA program, there was no English linguistics department.
You said you were not sure about Germany.
Yes.
So did you consider other countries?
Yes,
also?
I also considered Belgium because during my BA studies, I also had a 2-month program, language program that I applied for. I got a scholarship to go and study Flemish.
Oh wow.
In Ghent.
Okay.
Again. And that was a summer program, like a summer school. It was only for a limited number of students who were studying Flemish in Sofia University. So I did go to Ghent for this summer school, and it was an interesting experience because it was first of all, my very first experience abroad, a different culture in on many levels different. So it was a cultural shock in Belgium, not so much in Germany, but in Belgium, yes, for sure. But it also gave me some ideas on whether I want to study abroad, whether I want to continue doing my studies
Which
outside.
kind of cultural shock did you experience?
Maybe the way people live in Belgium. At least that's my memory from what I remember in hand. The habits of the people, for example, the fact that supermarkets close at 6 p.m. and there is
Really?
nothing. Yes, and I think that holds true still. It was cultural shock for me. And also Sundays. Sundays are non-working days, which is unimaginable in Bulgaria.
Same in India.
And also, the streets are empty after 6 p.m. You can't find anyone out, which again is very different in Bulgaria. But when it comes to education, I thought that people are very disciplined and also very goal oriented. And this kind of mindset inspired me to a certain extent. And also, I met other people from other countries, exchange experience where they're studying and what kind of programs they're involved in. So this also gave me some idea whether I really want to go abroad. And I think there were not a particular influence during that experience that persuaded me to focus on Germany, I wouldn't say. But maybe because I have heard from my professor that she has her own experience, that she's very satisfied with education in Germany, and also maybe from other people passively, I have heard that Germany is the place if you want to continue your education. So I focused only on Germany. As I said, I didn't have too many options, especially for linguistics, MA programs, because there were plenty of BA programs in linguistics elsewhere in Germany, but not for MAs. So I had to narrow down the options. to Marburg and also Tübingen. Tübingen was also hard because they require some extra skills that I didn't have, I think, in computational linguistics, because the specialization was in computational linguistics. And already in their BA program, they have done some computational linguistics, which I haven't had in my program in Sofia. Basically, ended up with one option, and that was in Marburg. Marburg was an interesting program because it was one of the first years. So we were one of the first cohorts in which we were doing this program. It was a mixture of linguistics and web technologies. So I somehow thought back then that this is a good compromise of what I was looking for. And what we were doing during my MA studies was learning how to create linguistic content using different modalities. And what I mean by that is learning how to produce tutorial videos, learning how to create web pages ourselves so that we can explain linguistics to students, broader audience. And yes, I would say that was my very first introduction to web technologies. I started coding at that time because we had to learn how to create our own web pages and also how to create video tutorials. So this is where I learned how to edit videos. Also, we did a little bit of Python coding at that time for the sake of creating our own disambiguation programs, algorithms.
What is that?
Yes, this is when, for example, we want to create a tool that helps, for example, natural language processing tools to clarify the meaning of words which have multiple meanings.
Yeah.
And back in the days, there were certain algorithms that were very famous, like the LESC algorithm, I remember, which is no longer applicable because there are more powerful ways of distinguishing like word embeddings at the moment. You don't need such special algorithms for disambiguation. But I remember that we had to, for example, connect to WordNet, which is a big database, big lexicon for words where you have different words with their semantic relations, and also apply this algorithm to disambiguation algorithm to disambiguate the meanings of words in context.
Okay.
So this was my very first experience with technologies and linguistics, and I found it fascinating.
So, if I understand correctly, that these wave technologies that they were teaching along with the linguistic
Yes.
in MA,
Yes.
this was creating websites, all the, of course, lecture videos, which people can also learn outside any program. But the main thing, as you said, maybe also these tools, that linguistic tools and computational tools in linguistics, implementing all those things with the computer programming knowledge information that they were giving you, right?
Yes,
So you
exactly.
were not only learning how to use some interfaces, but you were also learning how to programming in Python.
Yes. I do remember that we had to learn, at least during the first year, at least the basics of Python programming. And there were some intensive courses, but I wouldn't say that we were at the end of our program really professional coders or whatever. We learn how to deal with the logic of the language, of the programming language, so that if we see codes, we can understand the logic, we can modify it, and then we can also apply it to other use cases.
Okay.
So that's the skills that we actually learned during this program, which I found extremely useful later on. And they prepared me in a way for what I was looking for and also what I did for my PhD topic.
Okay, so before going to your PhD topic, let us give a structure how the master's degree looks like, how long it was, and at the end, what are the criteria for completion of this degree?
Yes, the MA program was 2 years, from 2013 to 2015. I remember it was fully on English. There were no German courses. It was an English-based program, and there were colleagues, yes, from all around the world. We were an intercultural cohort. There weren't so many people. I do remember we were, I guess, 20 people, maybe a little bit more, 20 to 25 people. That was the whole cohort of MA program. Some of my colleagues were very proficient in German. I do remember I was somewhere in the midst. I had a very solid basis, but I never practiced German. I never continued studying German in my BA program. The knowledge was not active in my brain. It was only activated when I applied for the MA program. There were some documents that I also had to consider reading in German. But when it comes to, for instance, communicating in German or answering questions in German
With the native
native speakers, responding to emails in German back then was not that it was impossible, but it was not natural to me. So I would have preferred to interact in English with them, which was not a problem at all. I have never experienced any kind of stressful situation because of the language in Marburg. I even insisted that my colleagues, the native speakers, interact with me in German, but maybe because they were also part of this English-speaking community, they also didn't feel inspired that they use German.
They also wanted to practice their English.
Yes.
So, do you remember the first few months or the year to be challenging because you moved out of your country for the first time, settling in? Because the international students, mostly when they move to some new place, they face some kind of challenges initially. And if you remember encountering some, then could you mention what are those? If some students are listening today, what are the things they should keep in mind, prepare themselves at least mentally?
Yes, I definitely faced a few challenges when I actually moved to Germany, to Marburg in particular. It wasn't a smooth ride. So first I had to figure out where I'm going to stay in Marburg. I had to apply in advance for a WG, a Wohngemeinschaft,
Which is a place where students
share.
stay together and share
Exactly.
the whole apartment. 4 people can share, and they have a common space for kitchen and
Exactly. They have a common space. The good thing was that you have your private room, so you don't have to worry about other privacy issues, but you still share a lot of facilities with other students, which I didn't find too problematic.
No, I even think it's a very good idea for international students coming to opt for these VGAs, because these staying together opportunity gives actually them more chances to adjust better.
Yes.
Because you are experiencing it together, you are sharing with each other, you are getting tips, you are getting information, and this exchange helps.
Yes.
If somebody is coming and staying all alone by themselves, I would imagine that person will face more challenges than this setup. I think this is a very good set for the international students or anybody who is coming. Even for natives, natives, I think
Yes.
it's many native people also opt for these because it's also cost effective, and also your social interactions, you do not have to worry about the social part of your life.
Yeah, yes. You are around people, and you can, even if you're experiencing difficulties of any sort, you can always turn to another person. And I doubt that there would be a person who would refuse to help out with what comes up. So yes, that was the reason why. And also because of other reasons, I thought that it would be a better idea if I share my very first experience with other people in a different country. So I didn't doubt about applying for a VG room before I come to Marburg. And the process wasn't too difficult. Maybe the only concern was whether I would like my roommates, the people I live with. It's very personal, I would say, what kind of criteria you rely
Sure.
on to decide whether you like it or not. But I wasn't very picky back in the days in terms of what people are around me. If, for example, the people around me didn't feel like being quiet all the time or felt like that they want to do parties, I always knew where to go to study or where I could have peace of mind. Because know that in such places you don't live with MA students who might be experiencing the same amount of work or working on different projects and or have the same level of independence that you are expected to have. You live with BA students, with first year students,
And even sometimes older,
or
also
yes,
experienced
yes, more
students.
experience.
Some
Yes,
working professions also, when they move to a new country,
yes,
they do prefer to stay in Vega for some months at least to figure out how the
Yes.
situation is.
Yes.
So, were there any other challenges?
Maybe the fact that I had to have my own address, I need to be registered, things that I wasn't aware in advance, or that I need to have my health insurance card, German health insurance card. All those formalities that no one tells you about before you go to a new country. Nowadays is much better because you can always find this information either on the university website or you are informed right away upfront by administrators
Or by from different websites that pulled all the information together for you.
yes,
Or podcast like
all,
this, where
podcasts.
like this, where we discuss what can prepare you better also when you move to a new place.
Yes.
So people generally should be aware that if they are moving to a new country, they have to go to the city for registration in most of the places.
Yes.
They might have to open a bank account.
Yes,
They
that's what I
might
forgot.
and they might have to also, what you mentioned,
The
health
insurance.
insurance, have it in place. It takes sometimes couple of weeks, initial couple of weeks settling in period. Then let's move to your PhD days. After finishing your masters, you decided to stay back in academia. Whether there was any plan B back then, and how did you decide that you want to continue to?
After my MA, I took a year and a half off of my studies. I went back to Bulgaria since there was also this financial pressure after the MA program that if I don't find a job right after the MA program, I won't be able to continue living in Marburg. So it wasn't just the financial pressure. I thought that it was also a good idea to collect my thoughts, what I really want to do, my skills, where I see myself. So I went back to Bulgaria and I took 1 week off. I just didn't do anything.
That was short. 1 week is nothing.
Yes, it was 1 week, I do remember. For a fact. And then I looked around what kind of positions are there for post MA students, graduate students in Bulgaria, also in academia and outside academia. I wanted to be in my hometown as well, to be around my parents. So I found first a position for an English teacher in a private school. And yes, I didn't think about it because I felt confident that I will be able to deal with the workload. And in addition to that, they offer that I apply for Another position that was part of this private school where I translate also documents. The private school also offered this kind of service that people who needed professional translation, they could also get translation of documents, mostly of specialized documents. So
Is it certificates or
yes, certificates, also medical documents, legal documents. And I was doing mostly translations of certificates, of graduation certificates, especially for students who are applying to study abroad. Maybe also some medical documents I have translated. But I found it interesting because it also helped me to learn about other topics and also terms in this type of realia, administrative language, also a little bit of medical language. After a few translations and gathering some experience, I also could apply for being a certified translator. So I got my certification as well. And I can translate now from English to Bulgarian, Bulgarian English. And that was maybe the greatest benefit of me working in that particular school. It was a challenge in the sense that I was offered to teach also small kids the English language, which I realized I'm not good.
what are the challenges that you faced?
It's a totally different approach. So the approach that I have been using to, let's say, teenagers or adults cannot possibly work with very small children who have a different way of acquiring a language in the first place because you need to keep their attention constantly. Of course, I was introduced to different methods, especially from professional teachers who are working with small kids. But I realized that teaching foreign languages to small kids is one of the most difficult things I have experienced. So it was a good experience, but I realized that it is not something that I can do for a long period of time, yes. I focus mostly on teaching either teenagers or people who want to do conversational tasks or conversational English. And that was basically my experience, teaching experience in that school. After actually I finished working for that particular language school, I also applied for a junior analyst position in a data analytics company in Bulgaria, which at the time I think it's still very popular. And the focus of the company was to basically browse the internet and read different newspaper articles so that you collect information about companies all around the world and extract sentiment about the companies and inform the companies then what and how they should improve their products, for instance.
How can it be done from the newspaper? This is not clear to me. Like,
So they had, as far as I can remember, huge databases of such, either from Financial Times
Okay.
or from special, very business oriented newspapers
Okay.
where they comment on let's say, the progress of certain companies.
But why do the companies cannot get this information directly by themselves by
Because
having
it's a lot of data.
Okay,
It's
I
a
see.
lot of data, and they need this medium, and the
Okay,
medium
I
was
see.
this data analytics
I
company,
see.
which does everything for them.
Got it.
I thought that it is a context that I can see myself. I'm working with languages, and at the same time, I'm using technologies to extract useful information. So little did I know that I wouldn't be using so much technologies in that position, because I mostly worked with texts, that's true, in different languages. So I ended up working with English, German, and with Flemish.
They wanted all of your expertise to
Yes,
pull together.
as far as I could extract the gist of each of the articles that I was supposed to read every day and summarize the information from these articles. So my major focus was to read as many articles about companies from around the world as possible, which were mentioned in all these newspaper entries, and to summarize the context in which the company was mentioned and the corresponding sentiment, whether they were mentioned in a good or a bad light.
But that also needs, I would guess, some idea and some knowledge of economics jargon or finance jargons, right? To understand
Yes.
the whole context. So
Yes.
you had to also go back to some kind of studying this kind
Yes.
of fields.
Yes, so we were trained for a month. I remember the basics of economics and also some basics of marketing. So we were aware of some business related terms, terminologies, but we could not possibly apply them in any way. We were trained only for the sake of understanding the context of the texts. And of course, use these terms adequately when we summarize the texts. But that was not enough, of course. Most of the people who worked like me in this type of context were linguists or translators. People who have done philologies, basically, but not people who were coming from the economics department or marketing, who have never studied any business strategies and so on. They mostly relied on people with linguistic skills who could deal with more than one language and are able to extract, to unpack the information and at the same time be able to get the gist out of longer texts. And this is what we were paid for. And now, as I think about it, that was not a long time ago, it was in 2015. Now, all these tasks that we have done can be automated.
Sure.
Maybe they could have been automated back then, and I'm pretty sure that other analysts, the senior analysts, relied on such machine learning models to summarize the text and also to extract sentiment, which we weren't using. They really tried to rely on human expertise. And I think that they might have used our examples of summaries to train the models.
Yes.
It was a good experience for me, but at the same time, I realized that I want to really focus on this technological part, upgrade my skills, because it was mostly language comprehension task. And I expected that I would use technologies to deal with such types of tasks, but they never introduced us. Maybe later on, while you collect more experience, you might also get qualified enough to be introduced to such technologies. But I was a bit apprehensive that such companies may benefit a lot from the human expertise as it is, and they will never get the chance to grow up more in this type of context. So I started thinking again of continuing my studies and actually improving my technological skills formally. So I looked around again for PhD positions after MA in linguistics and possibly PhD positions related to discourse analysis, because it was related to what I have been doing in this data analytics company. I didn't find anything relevant in Marburg, but I looked for something nearby. So I looked whether there are already any positions in Frankfurt University. So there weren't PhD positions in linguistics still in 2016. I remember that there were positions in literary studies, American literature, It was not something that I wouldn't have considered, but it was not truly my cup of tea. I kept looking for job offers on the specialized website or Linguist list.
In Germany or
In general, this
okay.
is
Everywhere in Europe?
everywhere in the world. It's
Okay.
called Linguist List,
Okay.
and they publish there all sorts of conferences in linguistics, job positions, professorships. It's a very useful source for linguists. And I kept actually looking for such job offers for more than 2 months. I was just checking regularly on regular basis, are there any positions in Bulgaria or outside Bulgaria or in Germany in particular. And eventually I ran into this. It was not a job ad. It was, they were looking for a graduate student, ideally someone who has already completed their MA in linguistics, who have also experience with discourse analysis and most particularly academic writing. And they were looking for a person who is basically willing to join the group who are working on developing a software for academic writing in Frankfurt. So I thought, okay, that sounds relevant. I don't think I apply to all of the requirements, but 80% of them I think I covered. It also somehow motivated me also to arrange my documents, application documents, because so far I only had them on my agenda, but I never got the motivation to work on my CV or to work on a proper motivation letter. So this was a good motivation, a stimulus for me to pay some more attention on my CV. Yeah, so I applied for this position that they had advertised on LinkedIn. I was very particular and detailed in terms of my motivation to apply. And I also wanted to explain in what ways I can contribute to the project. And I think they have evaluated this and have also considered that my skills are relevant to what they are doing in that particular project. So after a week or so, I think I didn't wait too much. I received a confirmation email that I'm approved for the first interview. And I remember that at that time they interviewed me via Skype. That was a long time ago.
Don't worry, I think some people still use Skype for their group meetings, as I heard.
Okay.
So even we have moved to Zoom.
Yeah.
Some people I think found that to be their own group app because not
Yes.
many people are using it anymore.
Okay.
Yeah. So you were offered for this project. You were offered also a doctoral position.
Later on, so it wasn't initially the case. So the position was also half position, which basically makes things not that easy for the person who comes to work for the project. And financially, it's also very challenging because with a half position, you're not paid enough to live in a city like Frankfurt.
Yeah, so for the listeners, one might have to clarify here that most of the PhDs and also the project positions, though they are calling for their advertising, one has to pay attention that what kind of position it is. So
Yes.
this half position, it pays the 50% of the wage.
Yes.
And there are of course 80% of the wage sometimes, but for a PhD student in certain fields, it's not ever 100%. I have heard also in physics, as a PhD student, even one has to negotiate how much percentage of the wage they should get with the PI before accepting the offer.
Yes.
And this is also one thing to remember to do or pay attention to, because none of the positions, as I have understood in the university setting at least, are 100%. And you have also teaching duties
Yes.
on as a PhD student. You are supposed to do research and also do tutoring as a teaching duty.
Yes.
So you are getting basically paid for your teaching part and doing research then. So one has to consider all these things. So it
Absolutely.
was a half position for you, and you thought it could be challenging to live in Frankfurt because
Yes. Yes.
some cities are, of course, the living
More
cost.
expensive.
Yeah, in Germany, living costs can vary a lot.
Yes.
There are some places it's really high, places like Munich. One
Yes.
has to consider what are the living costs there. All the metropolitan cities, like big cities, Berlin, Frankfurt, I don't know, Düsseldorf, Hamburg, they can also be pretty high.
I did consider that important detail concerning my living status in Germany. So I was lucky enough to contact one of the staff in the English linguistics department in Frankfurt. That was Frau Mackenzie. I will mention her name because she was very instrumental in my finding a place outside Frankfurt. It is in the suburbs, which was affordable, especially at the beginning of my stay in Frankfurt. I wasn't sure how long I would stay, whether I would be able to continue in the first place as a doctoral student. I even haven't had the aspirations that I want to be a PhD student at that particular time. I wanted first to see whether I fit in that particular context of the project, what kind of skills I would be able to develop, whether my skills so far will contribute in any way for the project. And then I thought that I can consider having or continuing my studies as a PhD student. So, owing to Frau Mackenzie, I contacted a very nice lady in a small town near Frankfurt where I could stay and live with her. And this helped me also quite a lot to tune in the atmosphere, to feel that I'm not isolated, that I'm not on my own. I also had the chance to talk to her a lot in German to practice my German skills.
And your German has improved a lot, you said, because of this interaction with
Yes,
every day.
yes. I definitely improved my German skills in comparison to what I had beforehand, especially my speaking skills improved because my landlady back then, she could speak English, but it was not her major language of communication, in the sense that when she was in her active years, professional years, she could use English more frequently. But back then, when I moved to her, she wasn't using English as frequently, and she also explained that she would think that it would be also useful for me if I practice German with her. So it was a, a compromise on both ends, and I really benefited from that experience. I don't regret it for a moment. And it was also a period of time, especially the first 3 years of my stay in Frankfurt and the suburbs, that I realized that it helped me realize what I would like to do in terms of my professional life and how to execute it. Basically, what kind of strategies I would like to apply to achieve what I thought is the important step, or the more
You are capable of,
yes,
perhaps. Yeah.
or the most natural continuation of what I have done so far. This place where I used to stay gave me physical and mental space to think more thoroughly about my next steps.
Okay.
Professional steps. So, yes, and when it comes to this project that I was part of, It was a very enlightening project because, first of all, I had the chance to meet linguists from different universities, to interact with them in terms of academic writing, also computational linguistic methods of identifying argumentation features in text production. I was part of the linguistics team along with Professor Frank Richter and also Dr. Janina Rado, who was my major mentor, and also Professor Gert Bebelhood. They were my mentors on many levels and also the major instigators for me to pursue a PhD topic, because my PhD topic was based on, or was very much inspired by this project.
Was the project outcome positive in the initial period so that you were offered the PhD? How did it unfold?
I believe during the first year, it was mostly working on the project, going to different places and investigating how we can implement our ideas. And after the second year of the project, then I started also considering working on my own topic, which was a continuation, or rather an elaboration of what we have dealt with during the project. I talked to my professor back then, well, he's still my professor, but my Dr. Fata, and I shared with him my ideas. And then I started working on a paper regarding this project. And this marked basically the beginning of my intention to pursue a PhD. That was also the moment when I was offered a PhD position.
Here, can you tell us briefly or elaborately as you like, in a simple language, what was your PhD question? What was your research question during your PhD? What are the tools? How did you go about it? And here you truly combine the technologies with the linguistic skills that you had been until now gathering. And this was still before the era of ChatGPT. So, what were the techniques and methods linguists like you were using back then?
All right. So, first of all, the topic of my dissertation was based on two major computational linguistic models. The first one was centering theory, and this model basically explores text coherence by identifying words which serve as connectors between sentences, and they are called centers of each sentence. And these centers can be realized either in the form of pronouns. Usually, most of the times, you identify pronouns that relate back to
the subject.
Yes, to the subject or the object of the previous utterance, or they look forward to another noun phrase or an entity in the following sentence.
Let's give an example here.
For example, John found Sally amusing. He invited her to his birthday. We always start not from the analysis, not from the very first sentence, because we assume that in the first sentence you have all the entities, the participants in a situation mentioned, either in the form of proper nouns, names of people, or full noun phrases. For example, the man I saw yesterday found Sally amusing. We can have another way of expressing a situation. We start with the second sentence, and we want to identify whether the second sentence is in any way related to the first sentence. How can we identify this? Well, we can rely on different linguistic means.
And then in the second sentence, what is the center now?
He invited her to his party.
So this is the whole thing as a center, or there are some parts which are center?
Only certain parts, and these parts that we are looking for, and these are one of those markers for coherence. They're called grammatical cohesion markers. The identification of pronouns, which have reference back to entities in the previous context or sentence.
In this case, he and her.
Exactly.
And his.
Yes. Exactly. So he referring back to John, her referring to Sally, his referring back to John. Of course, this is a simplified version of how language works, but this is just an illustration of what kind of centers we're looking for in the sentence structure. And in a broader text, and where you have multiple sentences, you may also look for other types of cohesive devices that tell you that these sentences stick together and behave like a unit. They form a coherent text. For example, discourse linkers, words which mark cause-effect relation, or words that mark exemplification, or words that mark, I don't know, contrast. So all these different ways of identifying relations between sentences, relations which are beyond the boundary of the sentence, so that you can claim that a sequence of sentences form a text or behave like unified whole.
As a
in way,
packet.
as a packet. Because there are many instances in which sentences can have these, for example, lexical units which are repeated in one sentence or in another sentence, but they don't refer to the same situations. They denote different types of situations. They are not coherent, yes. So this was, broadly speaking, the essence of my thesis, to look for different mechanisms, linguistic mechanisms that make a text coherent. And I applied the centering theory as a major model, and also the other model was another theory which investigates the linguistic, intentional, and attentional structure of discourse. From this particular theory, I investigated the interaction between the linguistic and the intentional structures of a text. The interesting part was, how can I identify what linguistic features will occur in a text depending on what is the purpose of the text. And I worked with academic texts in particular, again, inspired by our project because it was based on academic writing. And I worked in particular with academic papers. And I wanted to investigate how the purpose of the different parts of an academic paper, that is, how the abstract, introduction, the discussion, the method, the conclusion, the major part, interacts with what actual linguistic features occur to denote, to express coherence.
There is no simple way to describe it because it involves broader texts and different parts of an academic writing. So I guess it's very difficult to give an simple example here, right?
Maybe a simple example would be to take, let's say, the abstract part of an academic paper and to see, are there any linguistic parameters, features that can tell us that we're working with an abstract and not with an introduction.
I see. Okay, got it.
And how these linguistic features can be indicative of that particular type of text.
Were you looking every field for this kind of academic journals, or were only particular field?
I narrow it down to one particular field that was in computational linguistic texts. So these were my database, or rather my corpus, was only based on computational linguistic papers. And I basically extracted examples of abstracts, examples of introductions, examples of main parts of a paper, examples of a discussion part, and examples of conclusion parts from more than 20,000, I believe, papers. And I wanted to identify linguistic patterns, because linguistics is all about identifying patterns in all these 5 different types of texts, which are hypothesized to have different aims. We always talk about that you produce a text based on your intention, based on what is the purpose of that text. You don't start producing a text for the sake of producing it. First, you think of what is the purpose of me producing that particular text. So that was the major idea behind conducting this study. And so far, at least to the best of my knowledge, by then, I haven't had any empirical evidence, especially corpus-based studies, which show that there is such an interaction between the intention of the text and what it actually occurs in the text.
The answer, I guess, is affirmative, that there is
Yes.
there is a connection, and you can apparently
Yes, empirically
Okay.
prove that.
Okay, so you prove it for the first time
Yes.
during your thesis, that there is a connection
Yes.
between the intention and then
The linguistic
features that's occurring
inside
the text. This is fantastic. Then you said about above 20,000 papers that you had screened through for this thing.
Yes.
You use certain tools, computational tools,
Yes.
to figure it out and logically introduce them in a code to figure out. So the idea of the code might be that you give certain text, and output would be what are the connectors, what are the linguistic features that's occurring, and it will blurt out the intention of the text, where it's belong to. So there are some blind tests that might be also you are doing, right? You are training something and then you are doing blind test.
I guess that would have been a really clever way to do it now, as I think about it. Back then, what I was doing, at least that was what I have been trained to do. And this is how I went about conducting the extraction process. So for the extraction of the separate individual part of an academic text, I had to learn to use Java as a programming language, and also learn to use natural language processing tools. In this particular case, the Stanford Core NLP. This was a very useful tool for me, which basically processes natural language texts and provides a linguistic annotation to the individual words. For example, part of speech tagging, it assigns parts of speech to each and every word. It also does lemmatization, which is identifying the dictionary words for all the words appearing in the text. Also, it does constituency analysis, dependency analysis, which is basically identifying the relations between the different constituents in the sentence structure. So such type of NLP tool was not something that I was used to using before my PhD. I had to get familiar how to, in the first place, run such a tool, and then adapt it so that I can use it for extracting separate parts or the target parts from my corpus data, and also annotating the individual text parts for linguistic features, which I have collected in advance from papers, from previous studies, in which they comment, for example, that they have identified nominalization to be a very recurrent feature in academic writing. What is nominalization? This is the use of very complex noun phrase structures which integrate a lot of information. And this is very typical of abstracts, where you want to convey a lot of information in a very short
space or
in limited words, and you end up using very long, very complex noun phrase structures, which are modified by prepositional phrases or relative clauses and so on. So nominalization was one of those features that I investigated. There were also lexical repetitions or passivization as another feature of academic writing. The use of pronouns, the I, how common it is in academic writing. So it's very cultural specific, but it has been shown that, for example, the use of personal pronouns is also part and parcel of academic writing. So I had a long list of such preliminary collected linguistic features associated with academic writing, and also features related to text coherence, which are either associated with this centering theory. Identification of pronouns or other ways of identifying co-reference, lexical repetitions, or discourse markers, which mark different forms of argumentation like cause-effect relation, contrast, exemplification, and so on. So I searched all these different sections in a paper.
In a logical manner.
Yes. Yeah? And used NLP tools like Stanford Core NLP or Spacey. Spacey was also a very useful tool. It's a Python library for natural language processing, which uses different pre-trained statistical models to identify the most probable, because it uses statistical predictions, which is the most probable form, part of speech, or function of different words in the text. And I looked for my predefined linguistic features in all these target text types to identify presence or absence of such features.
It's a very complex task, and I think the way you are describing it, you have to go step by step.
Yes.
You have to learn new tools.
Yes.
And you have to integrate all this previous literature.
Yes.
Then existing theories that you want to work with these tools, the Stanford Core NLPs and Spacey.
Yes.
And then you had to integrate all this in a code which you wrote in Python?
Yes, I wrote in Python. And here a big shout out to my former colleague, Dr. Nico Schenk, who was one of the believers in my ability and also in my endeavors, because he and also Professor Webelhood, we were in a working group, and Nico was the first one to introduce me to Python logic for natural language processing. He was instrumental in pointing me to things, and I had to figure out how to work with all the things. And he was good enough to provide me with this initial feedback that anyone who doesn't have experience in using certain tools needs the support and the feedback, so that you can feel more and more confident to really go for it and to experiment with it and eventually to learn how to do it. Yes, it was a really rough beginning, I would say, but I was very motivated to learn how to use these NLP tools, which I'm still using in my current research.
On a side note, I want to ask you that you were mentioning these tools.
Spacey, yes.
And the Stanford Core NLP.
Yes.
For the background of ChatGPT, they also use a lot of tools.
Yes.
Are they using these tools, some of these tools, or are they using other ones, and everybody is using different tools?
Well, these tools that I referred to are the predecessors of ChatGPT or the so-called large language model based tools, and they're predecessors in the sense that they're using different techniques for.
Yeah, so I just want to stop you here for
Yes.
our listeners to say all these things in a simple way.
Yeah.
We are referring to ChatGPT, we are referring to large language model. Maybe we should here a little bit unpack all these terms. So in 90s or 80s, early 80s, 90s,
Or earlier.
the way humans advent of the computer, when humans used to interact with the computer understood the language in a different way. So it's
Yes.
only in zeros and ones. That was the way, like, you write something, the computer used to transfer it back. So in their language it still does, but there was only way to interact with the computer with computer languages. There are different languages. There are Python, Fortran, there
Yeah.
is C++, there is Java, there are a lot of other to talk to a computer. But with this advent of ChatGPT, what happened is that people now can interact with the computer in a human way. So
Yes.
computers have started to understand the human language. Anyone can interact with the computer as we speak, right? Then these kinds of, so ChatGPT is one of them, one of those AI tools that one can do it. There are several thousand, I don't know now, millions of AI every day is coming. There is Gemini, which are common ones. There is
Grok.
Perplexity,
Grok, yeah.
Grok. There is Llama,
and all its family.
all of them are coming in, but basically what they're using is they are understanding, they're processing, and their output, they're answering back in a human language, all these tools. And at the core of it is the large language model, which is for the texts, but it can be anything, maybe for images or for voices, for anything, right? So this large language model that you were explaining, that is the core of using all these things, right?
Yes, the concept behind, or the major principle behind these large language models, which are the so-called transformer-based models, which is a different technique in comparison to neural networks and even the earlier ones, which are the statistical models. They haven't occurred overnight, these large language models. It has been a very long process of learning how these technologies work, what they can be good at eventually. And during actually my PhD thesis, I was lucky enough to experience maybe the very initial large language models with the first GPTs that were published.
For the listeners, again, GPT stands for generative pre-trained transformer. So you were back then also using the earlier models of GPTs?
I was aware of them. They were not particularly involved directly in my experiments, but I was aware of them, and there were even online interfaces where you could ask a GPT to continue your words if you give it a prompt.
Yeah, so there is a question. Then the GPT is not only predicting your next word, it's actually doing much more than that.
Yes.
From the linguistic point of view, what is this more that it's doing?
Well, not only from a linguistic point of view, but also just in general, what was the revolutionary part of these GPTs was, on the one hand, the attention technique, which
The famous paper,
the
attention is
it's
what
all
we-
you need, which was actually based on another paper, which was earlier than 2017, I believe it was published, but that's another story. But that was popular,
which caught the attention, let's say.
Exactly. And by attention, what it is meant and what made the GPTs, the transformer-based models, more efficient for particular tasks than, let's say, the based networks. Well, it is a form of a neural network, but I'm referring to the traditional type of neural networks, which were mostly used for translation purposes. Is this attention mechanism, which basically means that the model identifies or makes calculations which are the words from the preceding context and also the subsequent context that bring most semantic weight to understanding the current utterance or the current sentence.
And here comes the statistical processes,
Yes.
statistical weightage, and the statistical methods that you were talking about before,
Yes,
right? Because
yes.
it's calculating the weight of each of the words which are occurring before and after.
Yes,
Okay.
because it is a context informed way of making predictions what will be the most relevant continuation of the sentence, or what will be the most relevant use of a word, because we said that words can have multiple meanings. So in different contexts, in order for the model to identify what is the most probable use of a word and also meaning, it should consider those words in the previous context, in the previous utterances, that would have the strongest weight on the identification of the meaning of.
And the way it calculates is based on the existing language, existing libraries, and
Exactly.
reaches of, I
Yes.
don't know how much. It can read web pages, it can use tools.
Yes.
It's, I don't know, petabytes
Oh,
of
yes.
data it can read.
So that's another very important point, that GPTs, this is another revolutionary technique, is the so-called transfer learning, which means that the model, the very large models or the base models, they are trained on large amounts of text data. And by large amount, gigabytes, maybe everything on the internet.
More than that.
Yes, I know for a fact, I don't have an experience in this pre-training stage of large language models, that this pre-training can take up a whole month until the model is trained on all the data that is fed into it. So from this pre-training stage, the model learns the basics of a language in terms of what is its vocabulary and what are the syntactic rules. So it gets very good with these formal aspects of language. It learns to recognize this base model, the fact that it knows about the language in terms of its vocabulary and in terms of how to combine words in a grammatical manner, what is considered grammatical in that particular language. You can use this base model to develop different applications. And ChatGPT is the second stage, where you create an instruction-based model which has been particularly trained to answer questions or to respond to instructions and so on. But this is the second stage, and this is possible because of this transfer learning technique, which allows an already pre-trained model to be trained extra so that it can perform a particular task. And this task can be question answering task, summarization task, sentiment analysis task, many other NLP tasks. And not only, now with multimodal large language models, you can also have audio or video based tasks and recognition.
It's fascinating the way this technology is evolving right now. And I think it's high time that we all get aware of this, especially the students who are finishing school or starting their career. They will have to integrate in their way of life and also to the curriculum that's done by the organizations, but it will be omnipresent in all spheres of our life. So you finished your PhD with this question that we understood now clearly. Thank you for being so crisp and clear. And then after that, you had decided to stay back. You are doing your habilitation right now and you are working with this large language models. What is your question that you are looking for now? And what do you think, what will be the role of the linguistics in the current, in the future, given its current development? Because I guess the linguists played a huge role in developing these models, but now it's coming together. Do you feel that linguists have more to offer in the future?
Yes, definitely. I will start first with the time when I defended my PhD and just say a few words that I was offered the position, the postdoc position, to continue doing research and also doing the teaching part. And I really enjoy doing this, clearly. I wish only that I had more time for research, because this is another thing that I feel inspired for, but maybe with more experience and also the necessary resources, this can also happen. But in my current research, as you said, that I'm using large language models, or at least I try to rely on different methods that make use or make sense of large language models in the context of linguistics. I still rely on these traditional natural language processing tools. Sometimes I try to combine the output of these NLP tools and feed them into large language models to, again, complete different types of tasks. When I think about what is the role of linguists in this extremely quickly developing arena of large language models, I would think that people who are really well trained in linguistics will be always sought, regardless whether machines can produce linguistic tasks or not. I recently ran into such a job offer in which they are looking for linguists in two languages. It was German and not Spanish, French, I think. They're mostly asked to do grammaticality judgments on texts produced by large language models. And the task of the linguist is to decide as objectively as possible how natural, or whether a particular structure or a particular expression is acceptable in a particular language or a variety of the language, and then use these grammaticality judgments and feed them back into the large language model so that they can train it, yes, and improve its capabilities. So I would say linguistics is part and parcel of the development of such technologies, and it has always been so. So large language models, it's not only about statistics, it's also about language and how language works. Problem is that all these linguistic principles that we are trying to explain theoretically and also try to implement in technologies using different computational linguistic methods are not that easy to implement, because large language models require a lot of resources. Yes, this is another big question of how large language models will be helpful if we know that they are dependent on energy and whatnot. And I would think that from a linguistic point of view, in order for the models really to consider the linguistics influence, they will have to be really more powerful.
So my question was more on the scale of, like, now we have trained these bots, chatbots, and
Yes.
other AI tools. They do understand the human language, the semantics, and the grammatical rules.
Yes.
What are the roles now of the linguists now that they already understand? Initially, with the help of linguists, we have come to this stage that now the machines learn all this. So what role will they play later? Will it be possible in a way? Somehow it's a big dream, but so this is predictive. Obviously, it uses statistical model. There is already a lot of error can happen. It's not error free in that way, the models. And there are also this world of deep fakes and the fake
things coming up. Can the linguists help in certain way to minimize these errors and distinguish the fake news in some way? It's a huge task, I understand. Are you optimistic that some of the tools from linguists and the methods and the processes and the models can help in certain way?
As far as I know, and as far as I have seen so far, large language models and deep fakes are getting very good. So, what, for example, have been easy for linguists to identify, especially, for example, in phonological terms, identifying dialects or variations or very specific, yes, phonological characteristics in deep fakes, it was to a particular time useful to have a linguist on your side, because they can give you a lot of input why this could be deep fake or not. But at the moment, things are developing so fast that even phonologically, it's difficult for phonologists in particular to identify or to say fake from genuine. This is a big topic about what will be the way to go to identify fake from, or to tell fake from true information, not only with the deep fakes, but also textual information. This is also a great challenge, especially in political context. But I guess many companies which are working on the development of large language models are trying out different strategies to minimize, because this is not something that you can completely alleviate. Also, bias is another big question. You cannot completely remove bias, or you cannot completely be sure that this is truthful information. But there are different techniques that you can reduce, minimize the effect of, let's say,
the information error or biasing in appearing in this fields. This is not the end, it's only starting, and there is a lot of work to be done. So young researchers and aspiring researchers can come up and can motivate themselves to work towards this. And I hope my listeners also would get inspired, because this is a field that needs a lot of brainstorming and ideas to come in. Let's move to a lighter part now. Then you talked about teaching. You love teaching. You have been experienced from the beginning of your linguistic career until now. You are teaching. It takes a lot of your calendar time. What do you love most about teaching? What is the most satisfactory aspect of teaching? And what is the most challenging aspect that you have faced till now?
Thank you for this question. I have also thought about this throughout the years, and I realized that I like teaching and I keep teaching, first of all, because teaching helps, and this is not a trivial thing to say, helps the tutor, the instructor, to clarify a lot of things about what they know about the subject matter they are teaching. As a student, you might have or mastered a particular level of understanding about the subject matter, but it is not until you start explaining things to your own students, you realize that you know so much less than you thought. And you need to reevaluate all your understanding of the subject matter and to unpack it and to rethink it in a way that it becomes accessible to people who haven't had the experience that you have had, or who don't approach language as you do. Because for me, language is patterns, as I said. For most of the students that I interact with, that I teach, these are first year students who have a different perspective what language is, in the sense that for them language is a tool just for communication, and for me language has become not only a tool for communication but a disintegrated structure from which you can disintegrate it, in the sense that every single aspect of what we produce can be meaningful and is there for a reason.
Integral part.
Yes, exactly.
It has become an integral part of the way everything is working around us.
Yes.
Right. So what's the most challenging aspect that you have faced?
The most challenging part of teaching is being able to address the needs of your audience and being able to adapt yourself to their needs. I realized throughout the years that even if I'm teaching repeatedly the same subject matter, with every year or every group that I'm teaching, the experience is always different. Why? Because the needs of the students are different. There are different degrees of competence in the first place. There are different degrees of interest, motivation. So these are all extra linguistic factors that influence my lesson plan, my information organization, and also how I approach the subject matter and how I deliver it eventually. And this is not something trivial. As I previously said, it requires a lot of thought process, a lot of thinking, rethinking of previous strategies. And maybe also understanding how you can be innovative so that you can be interesting to your audience, to be able to involve them in the learning process rather than be only static in the approach and repetitive, but also being able to engage your students because you know that some of them may be inspired by what you are doing and you want to give them a good start, a good basis for what they eventually will do.
Thank you for being this honest, and thank you for saying this out loud, because this also gives me the impression that you think a lot about the students, and that's only a quality of a good teachers. I have some couple of quickly, then we'll go into some fun trivia about you. What are your hobbies?
At the moment, my hobbies are journaling. I like to journal. And
Is it morning pages or?
yes, it's just morning pages, getting up, trying to put down the task for the day. I don't know whether it's a good way to say that, whether it falls into the group of hobbies, but it is something that, first of all, makes me feel more focused, but at the same time, more peaceful with myself. And after all, hobbies should have
Sure.
that kind of.
Yeah, and also one part of our channel is also skill building, where
Yeah.
we talk about all these tools that
Okay.
enhance one's performance.
Yes.
So it's totally in line with our channel.
So journaling, doodling is maybe during different times during the day, whenever I feel like it. I have found that doodling helps with concentration. I very frequently go walking, so not jogging, but walking. Whenever I have like 15 minutes time, for example, when I'm on campus, I just go outside and take a few minutes walk. Try not to think about anything else. And I have found that this definitely helps out if you get stuck on whatever you're working on, or you're anxious about something. Walking helps you, first of all, to bring movement of all your blood in your in your body, and helps you clarify certain things, to think more clearly.
I can add also one more thing here. It also helps you to breathe normally, because when you are anxious, your breathing pattern changes.
Yes.
It has cognitive benefits, basically.
I can't agree more. Yes. So for me, walking has always helped me to get back to a more grounded state. So if there was something that could make me anxious or stressed, it has always been the case that I either have to go outside for a few minutes just to have more space around me, which, as you said, helps you breathe better and also helps you your mental space. During the weekends, I like to walk more than an hour.
How many languages do you speak?
So I can claim that I can speak English, German, well, my native language, I don't count it, Bulgarian, but I'm sure about two languages in particular. I have studied Flemish, as I said, Spanish at some point. Now I have started learning a little bit of Italian, and last year I was also very involved in Hebrew because, first of all, a different scripting system. They use different symbols than Cyrillic and also the Roman script. So I thought that it's an interesting language. And from a linguistic point of view, I found that its grammar is very analytic. It's very close to English. It is speaking and also reading that's difficult because Hebrew has been influenced by Arabic, and they don't represent vowel sounds in their script. So you not spontaneously but dynamically include vowels between the consonant sounds, and this is very context dependent.
What motivates you to learn so many languages?
It's just maybe the linguistic perspective that once you are aware what are the major principles, what are the universal principles of how a language works, that is, considering the lexicon of a language and then considering the grammatical principles that allow us to combine the words grammatically in that particular language, gives you the freedom, or rather this general understanding how to approach the language. So you're not lost in that language, in a very targeted manner, how to start acquiring the language.
We talked about a lot what role your family played. Do you want to mention any role models in your life or career that had inspired you other than whom you spoke about?
Yes, I can mention once again that my current professor and also my colleagues that I'm currently working with played a really major role in my continuing working as or being inspired by linguistics, and also thinking out of the box of how to. Maybe I should also say that they have been tolerant enough and also giving me the freedom to think out of the box so that I can find myself where I fit in this ocean of linguistics and identify what subfield, what branch of linguistics is the one that I would like to identify myself with, and whether I would like to be a theoretical linguist, whether I would like to be an empirical linguist. And my colleagues, my professor has provided me, Professor Gerd Webelhut, and also my colleagues, Dr. Janina Radol, Dr. Richter, also Professor Seiler. They have always been very patient, very understanding, and they have provided me with the environment to be myself and to explore what I'm interested in and also to deliver in the end.
I have one more question before I finish. So many of the people who are starting out right now or who wants to pursue research, they're always thinking whether to do PhD or not. And PhD is always very different from whatever study we have done prior to that. PhD takes longer. You cannot compare yourself with others because you are in a unique path, your unique journey in that. So do you think for those who are trying to decide whether to do a PhD or not in their own area, do you think that PhD taught you something other than the degree, anything else in life?
Yes.
Do you think it gives you extra skills at the end to look back to that you are happy at the end that you have taken the journey?
Yes, that's a great question. It's a really great question. I would say my PhD experience has given me a lot in terms of being more organized, more disciplined, and more patient than I used to be. Because, as you said, PhD experience can be a very solitary experience. It's important also to say that PhDs in different countries may vary. I have heard from friends of mine who are now doing their PhDs, let's say outside Germany, in the United States, for instance. It's very different experience because they're doing actual programs, they're taking courses, so you're not left completely on your own devices. In a way, they have these introductory courses or some courses where you can feel that you're part of, let's say, a cohort of PhD students. In Germany, it's a little bit different, at least from what I have experienced. But I again repeat that I was lucky enough to be in that type of environment, colleagues who are supportive enough to give you pointers what you should look at, where to go to get, for example, the assistance of other professors. I told you that I was part of a reading working group, which was very helpful. In the course of my PhD. There are also other institutions for PhD students in Germany which are supporting the whole process. For example, GREAT here at Goethe University, which offers all sorts of courses which either target very specific tasks or very specific skills, or there are general courses, language courses, or, for example, management courses, how you can manage your time as a PhD student, or how you can balance work with personal life. So there are all different types of courses, of course, that support PhD candidates throughout this very long and most of the times tedious process. But at the end of the day, you are with yourself, and you also need to reflect on your own progress, on your own process. And it's always a good idea that you can think of your supervisor as the person you can always go to and you can talk to sincerely about all your challenges and troubles that you're experiencing. So before even going into a PhD, I have heard this from many other people. I have also experienced myself that the most important part of the whole process is to find a good supervisor. And by good supervisor, I mean not only a person who can talk with you about the subject matter of what you're interested in researching, but also really being your second father or mother that you can go to and discuss any issues that might have occurred throughout the process, that you feel that they are supporting you during the way, that they inspire you, that they are mentoring you, that they are there for you and are motivating you to continue and to finish your PhD process. It can be stressful at times, but it is something that you can always, I would say, you can only benefit from this experience because you learn to be independent on many levels. You learn also to deal with rejection.
Which is eventually going to come on your way.
Yes, rejection in terms of publishing
Yes.
papers.
Yes, sure.
But it's also a very good life lesson that we shouldn't feel that we should be always approved of what we have produced. As long as we get constructive criticism, we can only benefit from that, and we can always improve what we have produced, what we have done so far. Other things that I have learned from my PhD is to always think or be creative in the sense that do not always follow what others have done, because that's, first of all, not interesting in academia. Maybe outside academia, it's safer if you follow what everyone else has already done.
Up to certain degree, I would say, because I think wherever you are, if you are not showing your creativity at certain levels, people will put you in a box. Your growth, your development can be restricted because of this.
Okay, so then creativity applies in different environments, but I would say in academia, it's particularly important that you do not follow the group, but rather
The herd.
exactly try to show yourself, your uniqueness, your touch in the research. Academic work can be very creative as long as we find that aspect of academic experience or the academic landscape. Yes, maybe you can also remind me of what you have found beneficial.
I cannot agree more with what you said. A lot of life skills. Sometimes you get the first time the test of, but it's so important to get it. And also, I would perhaps add, I had a plethora of experience, but maybe at this moment I can mention one of them which played a very important role in my life is the exposure to different cultures and to different people, the sense of coming together to work on a problem, but being aware of our different backgrounds, different cultures, but still find some unification in that. And that actually gave me the biggest lessons of life, I'd say, that no textbook could give me. I experienced history, I experienced geography, I experienced every socio-cultural thing you can think of with these interactions, and that opened my mind and heart in a big way. So it was the biggest life lesson I would say I have got out.
I absolutely agree. So the cultural aspect is definitely a very important aspect of the whole process. And again, related to the inspiration, the creativity part, I would think that if you are in a different cultural circumstances in a different country, this could be a plus, an advantage for researchers because you gather so many insights from other researchers, from other experts. This should be something that acts as a stimulus for new ideas, for new thoughts, developments. Of course, there might be cases of not so positive experiences, but again, everyone has their own journey, their own experience. But just in general, I would think that the cultural aspect does contribute positively. The fact that you are in such a diverse environment can only broaden your mind, can only broaden your horizons, not the opposite.
Mm-hmm. And it teaches you also, in a way, acceptance, because in this world there are different kinds of people, and obviously not all the time we'll agree on something. There will be some disagreements, but the disagreement should not cause resentment in any way. I think that also the team spirit, and the team spirit becomes a priority if you are in a right environment, given also all these challenges.
And this also leads me to another aspect of being part of such multicultural environment. As you said, most of the times or sometimes you may not always agree with your colleagues or with other people, other individuals. So you need to be able also to verbalize, to learn how to voice your opinion in a argumented manner so that it reaches them. So this is another life skill that no one teaches you, how to voice yourself in a well-motivated manner so that other people, first of all, hear you and then understand what you're trying to denote, to express.
Thank you. That's a perfect way to end our part 2 of our conversation. Thank you so much for being so generous with your tips and ideas and stories of your journey. For the last, where people who wants to reach you can find you in social media. Your LinkedIn is still your name, Iverina Ivanova. And anything else that you want to mention here?
First of all, I would like to thank you for this interview. It has been a pleasure for me to share some of my thoughts with you, and I hope that anyone who is at the moment in this position of choosing how to continue their professional journey or their educational journey would benefit to some extent from my own journey, from my own experience. As I said, everyone has their own personal way, and it should be the case. But I hope that the things that I have gone through will give you some insights of how to deal with challenges more efficiently, and will give you some pointers on how to proceed from now on.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you. It was a pleasure having you in our podcast.
Thank you.
That was part 2 of our inspiring conversation with Dr. Iverina Ivanova. We covered everything from cultural shocks to academic challenges to the intersection of linguistics and technology, the realities of teaching in higher education, and the lessons Dr. Ivanova drew from her PhD journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more deep diving conversations like this, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Which part of Dr. Ivanova's journey resonated with you the most? And stay tuned for upcoming episodes where we continue to explore diverse career phases and life lessons. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next one. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.